Welcome to Pet Shop, and in this session we are going to be making two puppets out of common items of recycling waste. So we're going to be using a 2 litre pop fizzy drink bottle to make this puppet, and we're going to be using a large yogurt pot to make this. So for both of these, we are going to be using our bottle and yogurt pot. We're going to be using a kind of generic straight-sided 2 litre bottle. These should be fairly common. You might find that you've got one that's a different shape. We can also use this, but you might find that you've got to make cuts in slightly different places as sort of fits the shape a bit better. For the yogurt pot, what you'll be looking for is basically anything in the kind of 450 to 600 grams of something in a pot size. So ideally this, you might find that there are things like soup pots which might work, but they're going to be a bit more difficult with the rim. So anything that kind of is this sort of thing. Obviously vegan yogurt pots as well. Different sizes might be appropriate, but it's actually best to make sure that they have this rim on them. So let's begin. So just going to get a feel for this, for what we're working with. So these bottles are actually kind of quite ingenious. If you take the cap off and have a little feel around the inside, they're actually really quite thin, and they gain strength from how they're made. So these are made with something called a preform, which is a tiny, not tiny, but it's quite small plastic test tube about this big. And that's produced using injection molded, and it means that plastic is injected into a mold, and where something's injection molded you get a little kind of nodule thing where that injection has happened, and then this is then put into, so shipped to the factory like that, and then it's put into another machine that basically heats it up and inflates it into another mold, which is the bottle shape. And this leaves one kind of a thin wall but very thick bottom, and also these little lines which you might just be able to feel quite subtly. We're going to make use of these along the sides, so it might be difficult to see on camera. So that's what we're working with. The tools we're going to be using for this are a pair of household scissors. Now you'll want something that's got a very sharp end so that you can puncture the plastic. These ones don't, so I've got another pair of very small embroidery type scissors that are very sharp at the end. So we're going to use these sharp points to get into the plastic. Another thing you can use for some of this is a craft knife. This will make some of the cutting easier, but we're assuming that you might not have one. Nail scissors will also be fine to make holes and then kind of follow around with something else. If you're using a small pair of scissors, it's just that they don't cut as far in one go, so you'll end up with maybe more jagged edges. And also a tape measure. Tape measure is very useful because we're just going to be trying to find out where the middle of things are, so it's useful to be able to measure that. If you don't have a tape measure, you can probably use a piece of paper to wrap around and then measure on a normal ruler. Now we have hopefully got our tools and everything ready. The first thing that we're going to do is to make a hole in here. So all of these bottles have a bit of a small rim that you can feel here, just where the end of the straight part is, and it kind of starts curving down into the bottom section. So this bottom section is shaped in a way that contains the pressure inside here very well. So we're now going to just puncture this. Just a bit of an effort. And then I'm just going to try and cut this a little bit so that we have got a space to put the scissors in. So now that that's done, hopefully I can get these inside. So now we are just cutting along here. So that little edge that you've felt round the bottle is what we're following. So now you should have this separate from the rest of it. I'm just going to put this to one side and we're going to use it a bit later. So we're now going to form the neck of the puppet that will bend, and in order to do that we're going to find a place for that to happen. On these bottles I would go for basically the top one of these little ridges. On these ones that have a different shape to them you might want to go for where it narrows down because it will make more sense with the shape. So the blow mold that made the full size shape of this had two halves that came together, and then the plastic was heated and inflated, and this leaves a seam down the side on both sides opposite each other. What we're going to do is just follow that up, and at whatever feels like a natural point on the bottle, so on these straight-sided bottles there's a slight kind of hump out around here. So I'm just feeling where that is, marking it, and then marking along the seam as well. And then I'm going to do that on the opposite side to make a little cross. So these are going to be guidelines. So now what we're going to do is we're going to cut from one to the other. So to do that we just want to puncture in at one end. This can be a little bit problematic to do, but you can stuff the bottle with something like scrunch-up newspaper or cloth just to make it a bit easier to puncture it. So now I've made a hole here that I can get my scissors into and follow the line of this slight bump on the bottle. You might need to keep feeling for it to make sure that you still have it. So this is our first thing that we're going to have a quick look at. So it's going to bend down here, and you'll realise that going halfway doesn't quite do it. So the reason we've done this is just to make it a bit easier to keep your cut relatively in the middle. And we're going to try and get cut another couple of centimetres further along in each direction. So it doesn't have to be exact, and then try again, and okay, this isn't quite enough, so we're going to go slightly more. What we're making here is something called a live hinge. Now you usually would not do it in this kind of way at all, because you don't want your hinge to actually be on a bent surface, you want it to be on a flat surface if you're actually designing it. But this is going to flatten as we move the head. We ideally don't want to cut too much down here, but we want to cut enough such that the plastic will flex and give us a surface that will flatten along here. And then to kind of help that along when you're actually operating it, you can then fold that more fully to crease it, and then that will move. So that's your head. The next thing that I'm going to do with this is to give it some ears. We're going to cut the ears out of this base. So again, this is the particular physical qualities of the material that we're working with. As I mentioned before, it's very solid at the bottom and quite thin at the sides. So we're going to begin by cutting up from the end, and we want to go for where the sides of these feet kind of go into a valley. What we want is the actual foot bit and not the valley bit. So you should be able to feel that there's kind of a point in here where it turns up to make the foot. We can cut. And again, if you make a mistake with this, it's okay, because we want 2 of these and there are 5. So now we want to cut as far up as our scissors will let us go. Use 2 hands if necessary. And if it's getting too difficult with 2 hands, that's when you stop. Because this plastic gets very thick at the bottom and you will not be able to cut it easily with scissors at all. So now I'm just going to get the other side of this and do the same thing. As far as it will go. So now that we've got to the top of where we can cut along here, we're going to go to the side and we're going to cut basically about as far up as we can go on this between the 2 sides that we've cut out. There we go. So here it is. Again, just go as far as you feel you can cut, because you don't want to hurt your wrists, which I have done doing this before, and you don't want to break your scissors, which I fortunately haven't. Naturally, because we want 2 of these, we're going to do this again. Just cutting around the edge of that foot. So we don't really want the valley bit, we want the foot, which you may have already noticed is very much an ear shape. And again, once you've established how far you're going, then you can try and cut around. There we go. Right, so I think these look pretty good. Pretty similar to each other. Now we've got our 2 earpieces, we are going to attach them. So we are using a slot and tab method, which gives us quite a strong connection between the 2. So in order to do this, we're going to cut 2 slits, 1 at each end of this, about 1 centimetre to 1.5 centimetres in from the edge. And each of these slits is going to be about 1 centimetre to 1.5 centimetres in length. So here's it done, not particularly impressively, but good enough. Just going to make these 2 slits. There and there. It's not straight, but it won't matter too much. So the bit in the middle between these 2 is about 1 centimetre to 1.5 centimetres in this case. So what I need to do is cut a slit in the bottle of that size so that I can push that through. So now we need to take measure to find out where we're going to cut that. So I'm going to go from the marking that we have made originally. The reason we're marking this midpoint is to get the ears kind of roughly, well, as close to centered as we can. But if you don't have a tape measure to do that with, you can put a strip of paper, mark it, and then fold it in half. Or you can start with your thumbs on each of the seams and then move them at the same speed until they get to meet in the middle. If you don't get it exactly right, it's fine. It's not a major problem if it's not exactly in the right place. So now we know where the middle is, then we can just sort of try and pick a point to set the ears just a bit further forward than that. I'm going for where it starts to bend in from the straight part at the neck of the bottle. So yeah, this bit isn't going to be exactly exact. So I'm going to mark that and then I'm going to take my tape measure. If you take your ear and place it where you want it, and you need to see how far along that is, where the actual where the slits end. So here that is 3 centimeters. So 3 centimeters to about 4.5, and then I'm going to do the same on the other side. So I just want to make sure that that is the same distance. So what we have now are 2 slots, 2 markings for slots, which are the same distance away from the middle. So now we can get our sharp scissors. We're using different types of scissors. And then we just want to punch in here, which again is going to be a little hard because it will do what it likes. Again, if you find it easier to put something inside here, put some paper or cloth or something in to make it easier to get inside. Now I'm only using the smaller scissors at the moment because I'm making quite a small cut, just the length of that, and then I'm going to do that again. So now what I'm going to do is take the earpiece and I want to kind of roll this round. So we've got the actual tabs from the slit down to a small area that we are going to stick through the hole. So hopefully this will open up. We're going to try and push this open and put that through, and then we can open them out, fold the ear back, and now it stays, and that is solid. So we're going to do this again. So I'm not making a visible fold line really, I just want to make that curl round so it can go through the slit. So just bend the plastic so that the slit is opened up, and now we are pushing it through, and now it's pushed through we can open out, fold it back, and now it stays. So now we have this, and the shape of this allows it to be a little bit expressive. So the last part of this is to give it a mouth. So we can see that the actual opening there is quite far forward, it's near the neck. This one's got a little bit bent, but you can use your fingers to open that. So to do this on this bottle, we are going to, so it might seem like a better idea to do this before the ears, but it's just, this is another step that you might want to go through. So if you're happy with this and you don't want to do this other thing that's a bit more complicated to cut, then you can just leave it here. but we're just going to show you how to do this bit. So I'm again going to get my midpoint between the seams on the straight part. That's there. And so we've marked out the centre point, and then I'm just basically extending this line forwards. Trying to pick a point for the mouth to go to, so I'm going to say here. So we are about 3 centimetres from the neck of the bottle at this point. And now what I want to do is give it a curve. So there's a bit of kind of trying to judge it really. So make a curve around that's going to go towards the bottom of the bottle, so away from the neck and the cap. And that's also going to curve in on itself slightly. So if I give this a more rounded mouth opening. Again, it's not a disaster if this isn't precisely right. So if I fold this, if I fold the neck joint out a little bit, that'll help me get inside. So that's opened up a bit. I can stick my bigger scissors in. And then follow this line around. This is a bit that gets tricky with quite large scissors actually. Maybe I will show you the small ones. But yes, it can be quite tricky because of the curved shapes. Again, be careful with this not to cut your fingers. Keep the lines here. And now I've got a mouth that opens. So just to help with that a little bit, I'm just going to fold it. So now we're not actually going to use it like this. I mean, you can, but it's going to be a lot safer if you can take something like an old sock and put your hand inside it. And then put your hand in the sock inside the puppet. There's various things that we can do with that. We can put finger or thumb out to move the mouth out. We can put our fingers more towards the neck of the bottle to get more control over where the head goes. And push your hand in further to be able to be able to operate the head separately from the mouth. And you could, if you want, use your fingers or knuckles to make the ears waggle, making use of those tabs that are there. So now the first one's finished, we're going to get started on the second one. Right, so now we're going to start with the second plastic puppet. Moving away strictly from PET to polypropylene with the yogurt pot, and we're going to make one of these birds. So the tools we're going to use for this are scissors. As with the previous one I did, I'm just going to be using 2 pairs of scissors, one that's better for puncturing holes and slits and the other one for cutting, a needle and thread, a tape measure, also a thimble for sewing, just as a safety precaution, a marker pen. So there's also a downloadable template for the outlines to cut along, and the link for this will be in the video description. For the material, we are going to be using a yogurt pot, a large yogurt pot. So this is 500 grams, something approximately that size. If you don't have a yogurt pot, there are other kinds of things that come in a pot like this, like cream, sometimes soup. So this pot is quite a contrast to the drink bottle from earlier on. You'll feel it has a very kind of smooth surface around it. So this has been created by vacuum forming a plastic sheet that is the thickness of the rim, and that's been basically placed around a mould and heated. Then it's been drawn down by a vacuum to cover the mould. Like if you were to stretch fabric over something and then pull it down really tightly, and it was then stamped out of here, so it's got the rim might be a little bit rough on some of them, but it's smooth on this one. But that is the original plastic on the rim. The first thing we're going to do is cut the rim off. So to do that, we want to take the sharp scissors and we're going to push it in, punch a hole into the rim. I'm going to try and push this quite far down. And what I need to do to be able to use the larger scissors is cut along this a little bit until I've got enough space now to put the larger scissors in. And then we're going to cut around. So you want to get as close to the edge of the rim as you can. Just keep on cutting that round. So that's that taken off. And this is our pot now with the rim taken off it. Okay, so what we're going to do on this is just mark a couple of places on here to act as guides. This is to help with the with marking out the shapes that you're going to need to cut for the different parts of the bird. And to start off with, we're just going to find a reference point around the base of the pot to start working from. So the easiest thing on this particular pot is going to be where the printing ends. So in between those two blue sections. So I'm just going to mark that on the rim. Sometimes you can feel where the edge of the printing is and use that as a reference point. So if you then move your finger up to the rim of the edge of the base, you can then mark that with your finger or a pair of scissors. So now we've got that first reference point. So I just need to mark this also on directly the opposite side of the pot, for which I'm going to use a ruler, which I forgot to mention before that is a good idea to have, or any straight surface, and just basically mark that on the opposite side. The next thing I'm going to do is, if you have managed to get your downloadable template, there is a line across the long side, and if you fold it along that line, that will be the edge that we're going to measure from. So it's not on the edge of the paper because some printers don't print to the edge, or sometimes if you make them print to the edge it shrinks the whole thing down a little bit. So if you just fold it along that dotted line, we've got our two marks here, our original one where the printing ends and then the one on the opposite side of that, and it's that mark that we're going to align with the mark on the template. we roll the template up. So in the downloadable template, there is a dotted line running across from the edge that you folded down, and we want to line this up with the mark that we've made on the pot. Now that we've got these lined up, try and make it stay there because it will move a little bit. Our next step is to trace around these. So if you've got a pot that's mostly transparent, that you can see this through, then that's great. If your pot is white or another colour and you can't see through it, what might be easier to do is to cut around the edge of the outermost line here and then glue it onto the pot, and then you can see the lines to cut around. So we're going to trace along these lines on the template. This is easiest if you have a pot that is at least partly transparent. So because I'm cutting with my right hand, I'm going to put my left hand, or drawing with my right hand, I'm going to put my left hand in the pot to hold this steady. And similarly, if you're left-handed, put it in your right hand. So now we're going to start transferring these lines to the pot. Again, try and press the template up against the plastic if you can, so it will make it easier to trace around in the right place. Slight mistake there. So now we've done that, that gives you your outlines for the wings, tail and legs of the bird. But what it doesn't include is the head, and we're going to draw this freehand. So starting at the original mark that you made where the end of the printing is, we're going to make a mark part way down, so the black lines on this one are the right sort of size. We can go down here. I want to just curve it out at the base of the pot so that we haven't got a sharp edge here which things can catch on, and then I'm going to make the line come out a bit and then go back in for the beak and end on a sharp point. So now we're going to cut it out, and the body is going to be formed around the base of the pot. So we're going to start cutting from the top edge where you've cut the rim off. It's important to cut this way and not starting from the other side. We want the base to be intact to form the body. So we're going to start at the rim, and you should have ended up with the bottom of the curve, which is going to be the wings, about the bottom of the pot. It's slightly off here, but not by much. So we're just following the curve around with the scissors. Until we get right to the edge of the base of the pot, and then we are going to change direction here and then curve round to the neck and head section. Get the freehand drew just earlier on. to the bottom. And now I'm going to start up here. We've got our pointy beak curve. So what I'm trying to do here is keep this all as as large a piece as I can, which will help the remaining plastic to be recycled more easily. Cut. So here's the first piece that's cut out. So now we're going to take off these parts here, separating out the wings from the tail. So then that will leave us with the bird's body after this has been cut out. Curve this in here. I'm just going to cut this in from the other side. This is a slightly more complicated shape to cut out than the previous one. So it's important again to leave the base intact. Just going to cut up to there, up to the rim, and now along the rim until we get to first of these lines. And so now we're getting to the tail and the legs, so it's the outermost one here that we're going to cut. And then turn it round and then go to the bottom of the tail. I'm trying to keep all this in one piece. If you find that too difficult, then it's okay. I think even in that case, the pieces should still be big enough to be identifiable as the type of plastic they are. So I just need to, might find you just need a quick nip at the end. That piece is going in the recycling bin. So now just need to cut the tail away from the leg sections. Little small legs on here. Right. So this is our basic bird shape. So what I'm going to do with this now is I'm going to put my finger just on the edge of the rim here, and I'm going to bend in the other direction so it basically kind of pops, clicks, and starts curving the other way round. I'm going to do the same thing with the neck. Hopefully a nice snap sound there. And then I'm going to, so this might depend on the shape that you've ended up with. Somewhere around about halfway, we are going to fold the neck so that we have a little bend in it. So that's then folded downwards. So it's in the opposite direction of the fold from base. And then our legs, we're going to do same sort of thing, so folding them in towards the bottom. I'm going to fold them in like this and like this. Two legs that are about the same as each other. Hopefully your bird isn't too wonky. So now we have a bird here. So the wings are still pointing downwards while your head and tail are pointing upwards. So now we are going to attach the rim into the body. So what this does is it makes a handle to hold it by, and it also helps provide the tension on the strings that make the string puppet work. So because this doesn't have very much weight, and string puppets and marionettes rely on their weight to create tension in the strings, this is an alternative that allows that to happen, because something has to pull, one part of the puppet has to pull against another part of the puppet for it to work. How we're going to do that is to have this solid rim, and what I'm going to do here is, because this hasn't cut entirely the same all the way around, is I'm just feeling for where it's narrowest. It's about here. So in order to get it to push through, we're going to have to cut this to make two ends that we can push through the body, and then we're going to tape those ends up again. So what I'm going to do now is cut this. So now we have two ends. We don't have two pieces, so don't cut it into two pieces. We just need it cut in one place here. So then the next part of this is we're going to get our sharp point scissors, and then where the holes are going to go is actually where we made those two markings earlier on. So here and here. So let's push that through. Be careful to obviously keep your fingers out of the way here. You can also do this onto the craft mat or a piece of fabric or pincushion, that kind of thing. We're just expanding the hole a little bit by wiggling the scissors, just to give us a bit more space to push the end of the rim into the body. So now we've got the end here, and the hole that we've made for it. So it's going to need a little bit of force. We're going to push this through. And now I'm going to repeat that on the other side, so feed that through a little bit. And then on the other side of here, the other slot, push it through. So now I need to just manipulate this so that we've got the two ends back together again. And I'm going to attach them together. I'm going to use some masking tape because that's more visible on here for you to see what's going on. Any kind of tape is fine. This is mostly just to hold it back together, but yes, clear tape will look the best. Okay, so the next step for this is we're making a string to attach the wings, for which we are going to measure 1 meter of thread. So I have got markings on this board that I can use to mark out 400. So this is approximate. Again, 1 meter is approximately the distance for a full-grown adult from the tip of your finger outstretched to your opposite shoulder. So now it's time to thread the needle. So in the in Rachel's video with the sewing, there is a bit of a tutorial on how to sew and how to thread needles. We also have a link where you can buy a spiral eye needle, which is easier to thread if you have visual or dexterity impairment, which make it harder to work with a standard needle. So just to moisten the tip to make it easier to thread. So we've just got the thread through the eye of the needle, and I'm going to bring the two ends of the thread together. We're trying to make a very, quite a large knot in this so that the string will not go through the puppet when we pull the string. You're going to have to do this a few times, probably about 4. If you struggle with this, there is an alternative way to fix the wings, which we're just going to look at a little bit later on. Okay, so now we have a large knot on this string. Now I'm going to start from one wing. Now on these pots there's a little ridge at the top of the pot, so I'm just going to go around about where that is and halfway between the front and back of the wing, and push the needle through. If you are struggling with that, if you can go onto your table surface and push through, pull the string. This has gone through onto the large knot, but if you haven't been able to make a large knot, then stop before you get to the end of the string, and then put the end part of the string along the wing, and that should hold it sufficiently to be able to use it. So once you've got the needle thread through the wing, put the needle and thread through the middle of the hoop. It will be doing things like that. Wrap it round the top of the hoop. So now that's looped around there. Looped around the hoop. And we're going to go to the same position in the wing as on the other side. So on that rim halfway down. And I'm going to... So that's being... I'm finding it difficult to do this in the in midair, so I'm just going to do it into the craft mat. Put the needle into the mat and then pull the wing up. There we go. And then at the bottom of here we're going to tie a knot using the thread that we've got. So might be helpful to lay this flat to give you more space so you can pull the thread out a bit further. I'm going to loop the thread and put needle in, and then we need to do this a couple more times. And what I'm trying to do is draw this together so that the second knot goes on to first. And again, like with the other wing, you can pull the string through and tape it down if you've struggled with it or been unable to make a big enough knot. And now I'm going to cut the end of the thread. So we have the string in a loop here, and if I get it round, I should be able to put my fingers either side of the hoop. And I want to put my thumb first and ring fingers on the hoop, and then lift up the string with my middle and index fingers. So if you find that very difficult in terms of dexterity as well, you can use 2 hands. That is what you get there. So you will need to do a little bit of manipulation to make sure that your thread is centered so that both your wings move in the same at the same kind of rate, and that your hoop is also centered so that you're holding it straight. So now that we've got this done, we're just going to attach another string to the head so you can move that. Start off with, we are going to cut 40 centimeters of thread. I think 30 wasn't quite enough. So cut this off, and then again we're going to thread the needle. It's exactly the same as what we did last time. And then similarly with the previous one, if this is too, if you're finding it's too difficult, then we can tape the thread to the neck as before. So now got the head. I'm just going to fold this in with the sides into each other, and then along here, so sort of where the head of the bird is going to be, we put the needle through. And now I'm going to put the needle through the loop at the top, and then wrap it round, so in from forwards to back again. So that's just really just knotting that in. We still have our loop here with the wings, but then we can grab the head and move it. So that's your bird finished. You might want to just straighten the strings and just have a play with it.